Hello, I'm Reverend Scott Wipperman, pastor here at First Presbyterian Church in Helena, Montana, and we welcome you to our worship service today. I'd like you to know that regardless of who you are or where you are in your journey of faith, you're welcome here at First Presbyterian Church. Well, if you thought the Old Testament reading was tough, hang on. This comes from Luke chapter 12, and this is Jesus speaking. I have come to bring fire on earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. But I have a baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it is completed. Do you think I came to bring peace on earth? No, I tell you, but division. From now on, there will be 5 in one family divided against each other, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, and son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. He said to the crowd, when you see a cloud rising in the west, immediately you say, it's going to rain. And it does. And when you see the south wind blows, you know it's going to be hot. And it is. Hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and sky. How is it that you don't know how to interpret this present time? So it's good that you came dressed today in your casual clothes, because we're going to have to wrestle with this text here a little bit. We'll probably get a little dirty in the process here today. In the recent movie, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, Kim is a reporter, a desk reporter in the United States, and she decides to take this field assignment in Afghanistan. So she's over there reporting, and she links up in one part of the movie with the Marines and goes out on patrol with their commander and a bunch of the Marines, and they come across a village where the Marines have installed a well in the center of this village to provide water for the village, and it has been blown up. Later in the movie, she is again out with the same troop and the same commander, and they come back to the same village. And in the meantime, the Marines have rebuilt the well to provide water for the village. But on this next visit, the well is once again blown up. And as the commander and the Marines are looking at it, as the gentlemen in the community come out and talking with the commander and the Marines, Kim, the reporter, notices this woman kind of hanging around the edge, kind of sly, almost suspiciously. And I think her reporter sense cuts in, and she sees the woman turn and walk away, and she follows the woman. And the woman winds between the many different houses there and ultimately disappears into this door into one house. And Kim, the reporter, goes and very cautiously opens that door. And inside is a room full of women from the village. The scene shifts, and Kim is now back out by the well with the commander, and she draws the commander aside and away from the other Marines and away from the gentlemen of the village, and she explains to the commander that it's not insurgents that have blown this well up twice. It's the women of the village. You see, before the well, they would go down in a group to the river to get water. And this was their one opportunity to get together and visit with one another, their opportunity to get together and gossip about their husbands. But with the well in the town, they don't have that opportunity. They go to the well separately. And so apparently some of the women had some old Soviet landmines, and they'd stick a landmine by the well and throw rocks at it until it blew up, because this well was changing in their social circumstance the one opportunity they had to get together and visit. Norms have shifted. in our culture, particularly in relation to women. One, we have indoor plumbing, so we don't go down to the river to collect water. But women are equals, are peers, they're partners in life. We have women doing all sorts of things in our world. They are chefs, they are surgeons, they are CEOs of companies, they're diplomats. But this culture in Afghanistan was much closer to the culture in Jesus' time. And so it's very easy when we read the Bible that we just kind of miss sometimes how radical Jesus is, how much he is overturning the apple carts wherever he goes. When he talks to women, because in that area, at that time in his culture, women could only talk to their husbands. And they could only do that in private. If they were out in public, they were not to speak to their husband unless their husband asked a question, and then you answered it as quickly and as briefly as possible. Because if you were out in public and you spoke to a man, it meant you were a prostitute. And as women didn't go out individually into the community, they always had to be out there with a male that was related to them. Or if not with a male, at least in a group of women, like when the group of women went down to the river to get water. And so when Jesus talks to women, when Jesus teaches women, when Jesus allows himself to be instructed by a woman, the Syro-Phoenician woman who's talking with him, these things are radical in that time. These things are upsetting. These breaking all kinds of social norms. And we can just kind of skim over it because it's pretty normal in our society. Jesus upsets apple carts wherever he goes. And if we aren't seeing this when we read the Gospels, we're missing a lot of it. Sometimes we don't see it because our norms are now different. It's what he's doing is not against the norm. And sometimes we don't see it because, well, Christ came to reveal God, right? Christ didn't come to put a stamp of approval on the status quo. And those of us who benefit from the status quo, well, we're not really excited when some radical rabble-rouser shows up challenging the status quo, saying that things need to be different. And so we have a tendency to, we've domesticated Jesus a bit. We've notched down the things he said at a level or two. And we've had 2,000 years to do this, right? We're getting pretty darn good at it. And so sometimes when we read the Gospels, we miss the radicalness of Jesus because we have domesticated him a bit, or maybe a lot. So what's going on in the Luke reading today? Is Jesus just having a bad hair day? I mean, granted, it is the summertime. He is on the way to Jerusalem. He is distressed. I mean, he is going to his quote-unquote baptism, as it says in the text. This baptism isn't any little sprinkling with water. This baptism isn't a dunking. This baptism is a full plunge into what he's about ready to read. So maybe he's a little distressed. So Jesus tells us here in Luke, do you think I came to bring peace on earth? I tell you no, not peace, but division. And here he is overturning another apple cart. Because this doesn't sound like so much things that the Jesus often tells us. It seems the opposite of that. It seems the opposite of what the prophets and the angels foretold, that for unto us a child is born, a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And the angels come, and they tell the shepherds, do not be afraid. I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all people. Glory to God in the highest in heaven, and on earth, peace to those on whom his favor rests. And Jesus himself, when he taught, quite often what he taught seemed to be counter to what he said here in Luke. He says in Mark, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Then in Luke later, while they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And in John, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." And then a little bit later, "I've told you these things so that you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." And the apostles, they speak of him. They say, "You know the message God sent to the people of Israel, announcing the good news of peace through Jesus Christ, who is Lord of all." And here Jesus is telling us that he didn't come to bring peace on earth, but division. Christ's words today sound much more like they're not out of "it came upon a midnight clear," but more like it came upon a hot afternoon. Now notice, Jesus speaks in John of "my peace." "My peace I give to you." Is this peace different than our peace? When we think of peace, what are we looking for in peace? We're looking for the absence of conflict. We're looking for no stress in our life. We're not worried about our survival. We're not worried about what might go forward. That things are going easy, that we have food, that there's not wars or chaos taking place. But our peace is easily interrupted. Our peace changes when chaos shows up. It runs out the door. We no longer are in peace when war is ravaged, when there's distress, when we lose our jobs and our future is uncertain, when we encounter a disease. But Christ's peace, my peace is a peace that is with us in the midst of chaos, that flourishes in the midst of chaos. Chaos does not drive it away. The peace that Christ has is a peace that overcomes all that. So maybe in this text today, Christ is speaking of our peace. I did not come to bring your peace on earth. Christ came to bring his peace on earth. Because in following Christ, we're going to encounter divisions. We're going to encounter dissension. We will have differences with family members, father against son, because we'll have differences if we're following what Christ tells us to do. We'll have differences with other people's opinions. We'll run into dissension and differences with societal norms, things that society says is okay and acceptable, but which Christ tells us is not. We're going to have these divisions. So about this time, you're probably saying, okay, so where's the happy spin on this? Where do things get a little bit better? How do we domesticate this line that Jesus said? And there are some things that Jesus said that we have just found, even after 2,000 years of practice, are a little hard to domesticate. Things that are a little hard to pass over. You know, at times we see people who get up and protest, who write op-ed articles, who get out and almost cry about their inability to put the Ten Commandments on the side of the courthouse. I've never seen anyone get up and cry about putting on the side of the courthouse, "Sell your possessions and give to the poor." I've never heard anyone protesting about putting what Jesus said today. Do you think I came to bring peace on earth? No, I came to bring division. Those things we just kind of like to pass over, forget, and ignore. until things like the lectionary bring them up to us. If we're just preaching on texts in the Bible, we probably would skip this one. But the lectionary doesn't let us do that. So Jesus is making it plain and simple what it means to follow him. And in this short little thing, I think he's really telling us three things. We must see in this world what we might be inclined not to see, what we might be inclined to overlook. This past week on the Diana Rehm show on NPR, she was interviewing two authors that had written books about this very subject of overlooking the segregation, the discrimination in our society. And I didn't hear the whole clip because it isn't that far from my house to the church. But one author was talking about an example in this book of this black man who became a surgeon. He was a doctor, he was a surgeon. He lived in the South. He went away to school, to med school. He did his residency in another place. He became a surgeon, and then he came back to his home and was visiting with a good friend who was white, who was a prominent citizen in the community. And he was sharing with this man that he was going to be moving to California. And the white man said, well, we need doctors here. We need surgeons here. Why don't you stay here and do your practice here? And he said, because the hospital has a policy. They will not let blacks operate. And the white man said that this was a shock to him. He didn't realize that the hospital had that policy. And Diane Rehm spoke of when her mother had taken her to, I think it was the Met, when she was younger, to see some plays and operas and things. And Diane Rehm said she did not become aware at that time that she was sitting amongst all the white people and all the black people were in the balcony. They were not allowed to sit on the floor. It's easy for us not to see things that maybe we don't want to see. Christ is calling us to have our eyes open and see those things. And Christ is telling us that, well, we need to not only see these things, but we must act as he prescribes. We must do what he prescribes and he tells us to do about bringing about justice in this world, about caring for one another, regardless of the cost to us. These are things that we must do. And Jesus makes it plain that we must respond. We must respond to he and to God. Karl Barth, the famous theologian in the 20th century, was sometimes criticized that he was a universalist. And a universalist is someone who believes that all people are saved. But this was an unfair characterization of his theology. But Karl did say that he believed that God's arms were around everybody. Everybody were in God's arms. But we had to turn around and see that. We had to notice that we were in God's arms. We had to respond to God. And it agreed, I think we all agree, that we are saved by God's grace, not by our works. We don't save ourselves. God acts, and we respond. God pours his grace out upon us. We respond to that grace. This is good theology. And we as Protestants do really like that part about God acts. But sometimes we spend so much time on looking at the part about God acts that it kind of overshadows the part about and we respond. We need to respond. And Jesus is calling us to respond. We're easily lulled into the image of the gentle Jesus. You know, we see these pictures. Jesus with the lamb cuddled up next to him. Jesus with the children. Jesus healing the woman. if we ignore the fact that he's doing it in the synagogue on a Sunday. But we often overlook these hard to rationalize teachings of Jesus. We overlook that Jesus, who commands those who want to save their lives, that they must lose their lives. The Jesus who tells us to take up our cross and follow him. The Jesus that demands that we make a choice to follow him no matter what the cost. Friends, family, possessions, our lives. Such unequivocal loyalty causes contentious dissensions. In your life, are you experiencing these divisions and these dissensions that Jesus is talking about? These things that he brings? If we're not experiencing that, then maybe we're not headed in the same place that Jesus is. What has our decision to follow Jesus cost us? If our discipleship of Jesus doesn't cause any stress, doesn't cause any cognitive dissonance, are we misinterpreting the present time? Are we able to look out there and tell what the stock market's going to do, but not see what's happening here amongst us in this present time, what Christ is calling us to interpret? And through these divisions, this dissension, these contentious times, this cognitive dissonance, Jesus is with us. He has suffered all this and more. He knows what we're going through in these divisions and these dissensions. He sympathizes with us. And through these divisions, this stress, this cognitive dissonance, we experience Christ's peace. That peace that does not run away when conflict raises its head. That peace that does not run away when a little chaos shows up. That peace that thrives in the presence of those things. And through these divisions, this stress, this consternation, this cognitive dissonance, we experience life. True life. Abundant life. A life that Christ talks about. And this seems kind of contradictory, doesn't it? That causing division and dissensions and somehow help us step right into life. We could say, hey, this path over here, this angst-free path, this seems like a good one. Why don't we walk down this path? But no, Jesus is walking down this path over here. Remember, Jesus Christ is the apple cart upsetter. Jesus Christ upsets apple carts everywhere he goes, including in our own lives. He didn't come and sacrifice to affirm the worldly status quo. He came to reveal God and God's gift of life that's wonderful, of life that's full and meaningful, of life that's everlasting. Jesus is not giving us some fast sales pitch, trying to sell us on signing here on the line before we really know what's going to be coming down the road. No, he making it plain to us what we're going to have to do, what we're going to have to give up, what we're going to encounter in following him. But Jesus is standing there on the path with his hand outstretched, inviting us to something that is beyond our ability to even imagine. Something that's beyond wonder. All the while being frank about what we're going to encounter when we walk down that path with him. Yes, there will be division. But there will be my peace. My peace that surpasses all understanding. My peace that I give not as the world gives. My peace that no chaos can touch or diminish. So, this Jesus, with all of his apple cart turning over, is standing there saying, trust me. Take my hand.